What's up, guys? It's Lord Saint, and today we have a chop and prop. This is my Philodendron McDowell. Now, just a little bit about the McDowell. It is a hybrid. It is a hybrid of Gloriosum and Pastazanum. This one specifically, I've had in my collection for over a year. I purchased it from someone in my plant fam down here in South Florida as just chunks. They already chopped it, but this whole thing it's probably super root bound in here, but it just continues to, as you can see here, produce beautiful foliage. So I use this as my mother plant. Now recently I tried to acclimate it to a somewhat sunny but still shaded spot, and it was just too many hours of direct sunlight. So I'm gonna say it failed the vibe check in the spot that I wanted it in my landscaping, but that's okay. So now that I brought it back, it had two, I think, really overgrown areas. This one I already chopped, but due to some technical difficulties with audio, I lost that footage. But I did already plan to chop and prop this side. So lucky for me, I have plenty of this plant to chop and prop, almost too much. It's kicking growth points everywhere, and I think the mother plant is gonna need a repot sometime soon. But today I'll show you guys how I just conveniently chop and prop this piece specifically and pot it up and put it in my shade house. So we'll do a lot of rambling today, just some key points. This is just me just repotting, showing you guys what my process looks like. A lot of times with moving plants straight out of, or chopping and propping plants and moving them straight into the shade house. So I know the point that I want on this plant. I know generally we're really hesitant. The normal way that I would do this, like let's say that I do with a lot of my plants, like if I do one leaf cuttings of Jose Bueno, I know it's a different philodendron, it's a climbing philodendron, but if I do a one leaf cutting, I tend to chop the leaf off. To me, it's easier to put the chunk into a prop box and have that just grow out a completely new leaf. It's easier than having just some long leaf protrude and then figuring out some balancing act to keep that afloat, or having to worry about the chunk rot when I bury the majority of the plant to keep this upright. So I like to just chop all the way. I chop the leaf all the way and to just have my chunks sit on a mix of sphagnum and perlite. But in this case, I'm not gonna chop the leaves due to this plant already having some aerial roots on it. So I'm gonna pot this right up. I'm gonna chop it and literally pot this right up. I'm gonna look at this and figure that this is probably gonna be a good point for me to chop. I may lose a leaf due to the positioning, but that's okay. Oh, I didn't lose a leaf. All right, so this is what we're gonna take. And let me just get rid of the remainder. Now this, I am gonna chop these chunks and put them into a prop box and make a lot of mini McDowells out of this. And then I'll have to get around to repotting the entire mother root system here. But that's for another day. Okay, so now we can see a little better. Oh, all right. So this is what we have here. It is throwing out a new leaf, but a lot of the foliage has sun damage or weather damage from being in the spot that it didn't like so much. Here's a better looking leaf, but still has some damage from the weather. And this is what we're gonna pot it in for the time being. And this is just gonna allow it, and you can see the aerial root system that it currently has here. And this is what I'm just gonna allow to do its thing. These tend to be hungry. They're still good aerial roots. They're gonna be hungry and it's still pushing more. So I'm gonna bury it just like this. I do have holes that I made in the pot, make sure it has holes, and I'm going to apply my chunky mix, and I'm going to allow this to do its thing. I'm gonna forget about it. I'll check on it visually just to check. I'm expecting a lot of these leaves to kind of die off. I'm not expecting the newest one. I'm expecting maybe some of the older ones to start yellowing off. That's normal. I pull them off immediately just to preserve the energy so the plant can focus on the task at hand, which is continuous growth. Aerial root in there. And that's that. Right, so I don't have to focus on any weird sphagnum moss, perlite mixture, having this inside in a prop chamber or in a cabinet. South Florida is kind of a cheat code with our tropical plants here, and I have found success in just doing this method right here. Just chopping, propping right into the mix and letting it do its thing. And hopefully, and we'll do an update on this one, this will have acclimated appropriately, the leaves will angle back with the sun, and we'll have a beautiful plant. Now, before we knock that out, this is my chunky mix. So I know a lot of people ask, I just finished my 30 days of philodendron on Instagram and TikTok, and it should be on here on YouTube Shorts, where I talked about a chunky mix. Almost every plant got the same chunky mix, and this is my chunky mix. It is a super well draining mix, and in it I have bark, I have charcoal, I have size 3 perlite, and I know some people ask about pumice. I don't have pumice readily available down here in South Florida. So size 3 perlite is actually a good alternative. I know there are some concerns with the perlite floating to the top. I don't have that issue with size 3 perlite. I guess due to the size, it tends to do a good job of being wedged in the chunky mix and staying put. So it's not an issue. I have cocoa coir, and lastly, I obviously fill or supplement that mix with worm castings. And in addition, if you needed to retain more water, I'm a fan of down here in my climate, growing it outside where it can rain any day, every day, all day. I'll just add more cocoa chunks if I want a little bit more water retention. I think they do just the right job in just water retention properties. If I have something like an alocasia that just, I feel like really needs just more water, I'll use cocoa peat. And cocoa peat will be just another alternative, but it is my soilless mix. If you haven't seen already, check out my soilless potting mix video here on YouTube. And again, if you're finding this informative thus far, please feel free to like and subscribe to my channel. I'll have more videos like this to come. So that's my chunky mix, and you can see I can hold this up and water should easily, right? I can squeeze this and it doesn't do anything. Water should easily run through here, but I can add enough water retentive properties in the cocoa chunks or the cocoa peat that'll hold water if I needed to. But down here in South Florida, it's been raining every day during this season, and I tend to like to prep for more rain than less rain. So that's gonna be the mix that we put it in, and I'll tell you guys just about the fertilizer that I start with or that I use throughout. Let's get this show on the road. I know you guys are busy. It's morning, you guys are eager to get to the task at hand. Maybe you have your own plant chores to get to. And I think right there is good. And you see this was flowering. They've been flowering like crazy out there. If anybody's hybridizing philodendron, let me know. I've been successful in anthurium, but I haven't been successful, or I haven't tried really, with philodendron. I hear it's much tougher. So if you are, let me know. Or if you know of any good videos, let me know in the comment section. I'd love to check that out. Now with this, there's one thing I do want to add. I do not bury the entire rhizome. Now this will be our rhizome. If you bury the entirety of this, especially with it cut open like this, or just growing, and you don't have the appropriate mix for the plant, you can run into root rot issues. 3-4 years ago when I started collecting, I buried a gloriosum, and I lost that gloriosum because I did what any new plant parent would do, and yeah, you're supposed to bury the root system and the parts that go with it, and yeah, I lost that plant. So I do this about halfway, or to the point where it's pretty much sitting on top of the potting mix, or for me, I like to do it halfway or to a point where I can still see the rhizome from the top. And that for me prevents any rot or any issues with having too much water. So quick tip on that, just be careful with rotting out your crawling philodendron by burying the entire rhizome. If you just acquired or you're just now getting your hands on a McDowell, like I said, this plant is gorgeous. The foliage just gets gigantic. Before I move this to the sunny spot, I have plenty of photos of it, but the foliage upwards of 2 feet, and it's just this beautiful, I call it a deep green or beautiful green on a semi-gloss but rippled foliage. It's gorgeous. Whether you want it indoors or outdoors, it's gorgeous. Just make sure no direct sunlight, obviously, right, as you're seeing. This is a testament to the no direct sunlight. I would keep it filtered sunlight. In my shade house, I use 73% shade fabric. So that gives you an idea. If you have a patio, kind of like I'm shooting this video in, it'll do great in the patio, as long as it's a lot of ambient sunlight. Or if you're gonna put it indoors and you don't have a good window that would provide the right amount of light, grow light, right? Just make sure you give it a good grow light, which is safe. I use grow lights indoors for a lot of, I have a pink princess inside, I've got Monstera albo climbing inside of the house, and I use grow lights. So here, and I will show you guys, I have the rhizome visible, right? But all those aerial roots that I have, and off the ends, I'll just try to cover the aerial roots that are navigating back into the soil. I'll kind of tuck any aerial roots that I have under this potting medium, just to promote the navigation in it going right back down in, right? Now this plant is heavy. The foliage is heavy and it's leaning due to the growth that it had, or the excessive growth or rapid growth that it had while it was in that sun beaten spot in my landscape. This, as you saw, crawled out of the pot that it was in and started to angle down, which resulted in the foliage being at this weird angle. My hope is that in here, when it gets into the shade house, the foliage will now chase the sun and hopefully they'll turn or move too. If not, it's okay. The new foliage is what I'm concerned about. So what I end up doing is, and I'll probably need more than one, I use as many dowels or bamboo rods or anything that you have. It's just going to be temporary while this plant tries to establish itself. You can see here I'm pushing this right here. I'll use anything that I have to kind of just prop this up, right? And I'll tie it off. This, maybe I can even do a 2-for-1. Let's see if I can just, there we go. See if I can just bury that and tie that off. That way I have a good holding point. And just any gardening tape, Velcro, anything that you have that's going to stay put. I'll just tie a basic knot to hold this plant up, right? Because it has no foundation. It's not sturdy in the pot. But we've already exposed it about halfway. The rhizome is only exposed halfway. So this plant can easily tilt. You can blow on this and it'll tilt over. So just use anything that you have to prop it up. Get creative with it, it's fine. Doesn't matter really what you use. It's all temporary. Like I said, I'm probably gonna need another bamboo rod. I'll take care of that after. But this seems to have somewhat done the trick. And just like that is how I'll leave it. And here's what we're left with, right? And obviously this is gonna be a temporary pot for it, but I already did a the other half of this, right? So my goal is, obviously I have the mother plant. I like to keep a nice one, and then this one will be up for seller trade. I'll just grow it for more cuttings and seller trade. So this pot will be temporary. I do get a longer pots, which are about, I want to say they're 3 foot, 2 to 3 foot pots, and those I do a little differently. When we come to that point, I use fertilizer. I am a fan of slow release fertilizer, so I do use Osmocote on my new pots, but I do supplement my Osmocote with liquid fertilizer. I know a lot of people ask me, well, what are you feeding your plants with? Well, I use Osmocote, but down here in South Florida, it's tough because it says 6 months on the packaging, but our climate kind of speeds that up. So I may get 4 or 5 months out of this. I may get 3 months. I'm not sure. You know, it depends on what the climate is. So I do supplement just for the sake of the plant not lapsing. I do fertilize year round. Down here, we have the climate for it. So I do fertilize. I know in some climates you stop fertilizing, you give the plant dormant phase. These plants just kind of love it all the way through the year. So it's not an issue for me. Now I will add a liquid fertilizer and give this a deep watering. The plant the plant is going through shock due to me just chopping a large portion of it, but that's what we have. So we went from that dangling portion outside of the mother plant to now this is what we have here. A new leaf is coming, and I will be sure to do updates on this plant, but that's what it looks like, just chopping and propping straight into the potting medium and having the appropriate climate or space even to just have this plant continue what it's doing. The aerial roots are important, which is why a lot of times if you feel like you're going to chop and prop, you can prep the plant for that chop and prop. We've all seen it before where you just wrap some, let's say sphagnum moss or whatever medium that you have around the plant. You can use saran wrap, just keep it moist and allow the plant's aerial roots in that point that you've wrapped that sphagnum moss or whatever in to start to grow, and then you can chop that section and drop it straight back in. The important thing is that it has some type of aerial root that can now take over for the plant. Again, I appreciate you guys joining me today. This was, I hope it was a quick one. It felt like a quick one. This is how I like to get my morning started with these plant projects. If you have any questions, feel free to ask below. If you enjoyed this video, if you're enjoying the page thus far, please feel free to like, share, and subscribe. I appreciate all of you. I appreciate all the comments, the feedback. I especially appreciate that. If you haven't been to my other social media pages, @LordSaint_ on Instagram, @_LordSaint on TikTok. And then obviously you can find me here where I am getting better at dropping and releasing content for you guys. That's what we have. I appreciate you guys. Have a great day. Thanks for joining me. Lord Saint.